Hello, everybody. We're going to talk about something today that is pretty scary and it's rooted in pretty dark realities about the world and our system of governance and the status quo. So if you don't want to watch that, feel free not to. But the topic that I wanted to talk about today is accelerationism. Now, what is that? What does it mean? What are its implications? And what is the strategy behind that? Well, without taking a biased approach, because I personally don't agree with this, and I personally recommend that we don't go that route. However, what accelerationism is the idea that capitalism is fundamentally flawed. It is a system that is a ticking time bomb, and it's about to explode. We're about to see great recessions, huge disparities of wealth that we are not ready for. We're about to see huge displacement of people, climate refugees, and with high housing, that's going to cause great social unrest. We are going to see massive riots based on the fact that people don't have health care and are dying. People can't pay off their debt and get good paying jobs to do so. All of these factors, the fact that we have a global supply chain that is currently disrupted from the coronavirus, and that's highlighting our flaws with free trade and the fact that we don't really make any products in America anymore, and that we are not able to sustain our populace with our own domestic production. These are all things that are symptomatic of late-stage capitalism that shows the shortcomings of prioritizing greed, profits, and shareholders over people and a populace. These are all about to reach their breaking point. Our inaction on climate change is definitely because of the fossil fuel industry's lobbying and presence in our government. It's based on economic gains and thought. And same with our inaction on healthcare. These are all things that are linked to capitalism. Accelerationism is the idea that we have to completely throw all of our weight behind the capitalist system, even if we don't agree with it, because if we speed up that process of deterioration and we speed up that process of suffering, more and more people are going to become aware and take action to fight against the status quo. The idea that, which is unfortunate, it is prevalent in I shouldn't say prevalent. It's a small belief that is held by some Bernie supporters, by some outsiders who are outside the political spectrum, who maybe didn't support Bernie, but who are very leftist and or anarchist and want to see the collapse of capitalism come sooner, so we can immediately put in politicians who can fix this, and we can, on a societal level, make everyone realize that capitalism is a failure and that we need an alternative approach. Now, how do people propose to do this? Well, I know a decent amount of people who want to vote for Trump in order to accelerate our inaction on climate change, our healthcare failing, the recession that's going to become inevitable due to the coronavirus and disrupted supply chains. This is all, it's very heady, sort of cerebral, big game political thinking, and it's not necessarily radical. It's just an intense approach. Now, why do I disagree with this? One, optics. I sort of myself gave up on the hope that we can reform the Democratic Party. I think it's beyond repair. I think that the party's too corrupt. It is way too in bed with lobbyists and special interests that hurt the general populace, and they prove that they are always going to be taking micro steps to bettering our society because they're trying to find ways that we can still facilitate business and corporatism, neoliberalism, essentially. Look into that if you don't know what I'm talking about. But that is sort of the prevailing ideology of the Democratic Party and why we see inaction. It's hard to debate against this point because it seems that no matter what, we are going to see capitalism's inevitable demise, and we are going to suffer the effects of that on a very wide-scale societal level, which is very scary. And a lot of people are like, let's rip the Band-Aid off, let's do this because people need to become aware and take action now. I'm a utilitarian, and I believe that we need to have the most amount of good for the most amount of people. I think that these people do as well, and their thought is if we make this faster, more people are going to get on board with progressive or leftist politics, and we're going to see a massive reform. I just don't think that's going to happen. I'm too cynical. I think that people vote against their own interests because politics is too outside of their life, or they think that the separation between politics and their own life and condition are two separate things and it doesn't affect them, or they feel disenfranchised and that they can't do anything about it. I think that accelerationism would not work because we can't trust that the media would actually call out the fact that these failings are because of the capitalist system and corporations and because of special interests and their influence over public policy. I just don't think that that would happen. I think that people would. I think that once our economy, we'll start with the environment. Once our environment really starts failing and we start seeing massive exoduses of people, and we start having widespread climate refugees and sort of the instability that that might cause in such a short amount of time, I think that right-wing media is going to go on the immigration attack and say that people are trying to take advantage of our own resources and we're doing too well in climate, and because of that people are going to move in and want to use our resources. I think on the left, I think on the Democrat side, people are going to be saying that it's not corporations' faults, but it's just because the right-wingers are spreading too much disinformation about climate change, and we need to be more serious about it, but not actually say that, 70% of the global emissions is caused by only 100 corporations. They're not going to come out and say that. I think they're going to try to peddle the individualistic approach of just use plastic straws and drive less and take public transit and ride your bike. That's going to be the narrative that they push because they're neoliberals and they're not going to critique the capitalist system when we need to. So I don't necessarily think that accelerationism would work. The problem is, what if we keep the system that we have now? I think that the populist sentiment is growing, and I think that the more that we run politicians in this system, more outsiders, more insurgents, that's going to continue to raise the public dialogue, and people are going to keep talking. I'm a reformist, though. I don't believe in necessarily revolution in the traditional sense that that's going to solve anything. I think the problem is, and the reason why a lot of these countries in the past have failed with maybe more Marxist socialism, is because we tried to enact things too quickly, and it was not a sustainable model for countries. And also, the world stage was not ready for a Marxist socialist government because we were very much entrenched in Western ideology. We were very much entrenched in the rise of geopolitics and global dominance. I think that the United States would not allow, and the West would not allow, for other systems of thought to challenge their own sort of authority over the world. And so they also imposed things like embargoes and imposed things, economic sort of incentives, and also militaristic incentives. I mean, them toppling consistently, like Chile's government, Guatemala's government, El Salvador, like all of these countries in which we topple foreign governments and don't allow for socialism to be facilitated, but also in the sense with Cuba, even though we tried that and it failed, embargoes, which basically starved them out of 70 to 90% of their income and GDP because we were their biggest trade partner. So I don't necessarily think inciting radical actions would necessarily be good for the country, and I don't think that that would, in optics sense, make our cause look any more desirable. I think that that would further infuriate people, and the neoliberals would do what they normally do and virtue signal and take the moral high ground and say that we're too dangerous, and then our whole movement and progressives would be labeled as too extreme and a radical movement, which would then further delegitimize us, unfortunately more so than we're already at with the whole Bernie bro thing, which is a problem, but there have been studies coming out that say that this is not an exclusive thing to Bernie, and that every camp has these toxic supporters with the nature of online discussion and the divisive nature of politics. So I think that we would only be really shooting ourselves in the foot by doing that. I can't stop people from doing that, and they're going to do what they do, but I disagree with it, and I discourage it for people who are thinking about that. Now, am I going to cast a strategic vote in November? Probably. I live in California. Joe Biden is for sure going to win that state, and he's going to get all of our delegates from that state. So my vote being for Biden or being for a third party candidate, is not going to make the difference. It just isn't. So I am in a situation where I can cast a strategic vote. If you're from Florida, if you're from Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, then I would advise you to not make that vote. I think that I'm in a position where I can, and maybe I want to make a third party viable. Maybe I want to send a message that a lot of us are upset with the Democratic Party and that our ideas are not being represented and that we disagree with their leadership and their platform and their institution. I don't recommend that for other people. The other problem with accelerationism is harm reduction. I think that we cannot prevent what's about to happen, and that's the scary reality. We just can't. I mean, with neoliberalism, with capitalism, with the U.S.'s right-wing approach to everything, including with Democrats. Democrats are a center-right party by the rest of the world's standards and metrics. Do not get that wrong. I mean, look at any other country. The Democrats are literally a right-wing party. So, and there's just no way around that. However, they are better than the current position of the Republican Party and Trumpians, who are neo-fascist and state capitalists and who rely on right-wing populism and racism and xenophobia to prop themselves up. So am I gonna want to see that continued, and do I want to see marginalized people be further targeted and attacked? No. And I think that especially with the coming climate crisis and the fact that we're going to have a lot of climate refugees, it is extremely, extremely dangerous to give a xenophobic, racist, right-wing, authoritarian-esque, not quite there, leader even more power in a bigger soapbox. You know, we're going to see widespread hatred and widespread attacks on immigrants that we have not been able to comprehend and cannot comprehend yet. And so I just highly advise that in that way, maybe accelerationism is extremely dangerous, and voting for Trump as a protest vote is not a good idea. And yes, it highlights the flaws with our government, but I just don't think that it's a safe move to do. And the problem with empowering Republicans is that Trump is going to probably further create tax cuts. He's going to further avoid putting scrutiny on corporations. He's going to further trade deals and outsourcing, even though he said he wouldn't. He did with USMCA. We're going to see further information about climate change denialism being disseminated. We're going to just, it's empowering someone who is actually dangerous to this country. So I highly suggest you don't go the accelerationist route. I highly advise you to think about your vote in the general election, and I highly advise you to think about what kind of political moves you can make with your vote. If you're in California, maybe you can consider doing a third-party vote to help increase them to viability. Maybe you write in Bernie Sanders. Maybe you vote for Joe Biden. It doesn't matter. It's your own choice. In states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin, and in Florida, it's a lot more imperative that you probably vote for the party that you closely align with, even if you disagree and are disgusted by their leadership. I think voting for Joe Biden is essential in that case. It's all about harm reduction, and it's all about big picture. And the thing is, this movement in this wing of the Democratic Party is not going away. We're only getting louder and louder. Our numbers are growing and growing. Our representation in Congress and the Senate is growing. And people like Bernie Sanders, despite what this election may have proved with suburban white voters and neoliberals and moderates, he is still the most liked senator and has the highest approval rating of any senator in the country. And he has undoubtedly sown a seed for political discourse and questioning of our institutions and left-leaning populist sentiment that is not going to go away and that our generation will remember. There's only going to be more Bernie Sanders in the future. So I have hope that we can reform the party. I also believe that we should form a separate progressive party, although I don't think that we should necessarily shoot ourselves in the foot quite yet, because the threat of fascism in these trying times is so massive. And I'm able to cast a strategic vote because of my state of origin, but other people cannot. So I understand that, and that's why I don't advise everyone to do that. However, I think that we should consider in 2024, maybe when this threat is more quelled, that maybe we should have some leverage and some bargaining with the Democratic Party, because they're continuing to antagonize us and they're continuing to silence our voices. They're kicking protesters out of Joe Biden rallies who are workers who have lost their jobs from NAFTA and calling them Bernie bros. Like, this is the level we're at now. There's vitriol against the Progressive Party within the Democratic establishment. So we have to say, hey, we hear you loud and clear, and you know what? We'll form our own party and leave. And I think that we need to have some leverage and some bargaining, or else they're never going to listen to us and the system's going to keep going. However, I don't believe in accelerationism. I don't believe in voting for Trump as an alternative and as a fuck you to the establishment. I think that there are too many lives at risk, and the idea of empowering a racist, xenophobic, climate change denying, authoritarian leader praising right-wing demagogue is not a good idea. And I think that in terms of harm reduction, I think that our best bet is supporting whoever is the strategic best pick based on your state. So I encourage you to look into who that is. I encourage you to look at your state's rules and the political climate. If you're in a battleground state, if you're in a state that can go blue or red, I recommend you vote blue and you vote Democrat, whoever that is. I sure hope Joe Biden makes my time easier by picking a progressive VP and a progressive cabinet. However, picking Jamie Dimon, the person that Elizabeth Warren publicly eviscerated on his bailouts and the way he treats his workers and his pay compared to his workers, seeing him as the Secretary of Treasury on that short list gives me not a lot of hope. So I'm going to vote on my conscience because I'm able to. If you're in New York, if you're in Massachusetts, if you're in any of these places that are always going to vote Democrat no matter what, maybe consider. And I still don't recommend that to everyone, and I'll get a lot of shit for saying that. If you're in battleground states or red states, I recommend you vote blue. And yeah, so that's accelerationism. That's I think it's important to talk about the anger and the populist sentiment in this country, because it is very real and it is going to have real consequences, and I think we need to know about these things. And especially if you're a moderate Democrat or someone who believes in the Democratic Party, you need to understand what's going on in the climate and what's happening in the party, because we keep losing races on the left, and we need to do some serious soul searching about why that is, and we have to be honest with our shortcomings, because this is the level we're at right now, and it's scary. And we're about to see some crazy things that we could have not prepared for, and it's just the reality, and we need to confront that. And that's what leadership is. It's not about avoiding the problem and talking about the yesteryears when things were easy and when everyone was ignorant about these looming problems that were growing and festering. This is a real issue, and we need to actually talk about it and have some serious accountability and leadership in this country, or else we are going to burn in flames. We're going to burn in riots caused by far-right nationalistic assholes who are going to target climate refugees and target leftists. We are going to have inaction, and more people are going to die because they can't see a doctor. People are going to die deaths of despair because they're entrenched in debt that they can't get over, and they can't start families in this country. This is a real issue, so it's worth talking about and it's worth highlighting despite how scary it is. And we can't just pretend that everything's fine because we want our political sports team to win. It's so much bigger than that, and we have to really look at this hard and actually be honest with ourselves. I'm not an accelerationist. I think that's too dangerous moving into what we're about to move into, but I understand their sentiment. That's the problem, is that they make arguments and points that are worth considering, which is why we really need to take an honest look at ourselves, because there are some huge shortcomings in this party that are turning away workers, they're turning away the base, and it's dangerous. It's super dangerous, and we're going to go into this decade with a lot of division, and we're going to be losing to the party that consistently falls in line with people who are corrupt, people who are racist, and people who dog whistle to other racists and nationalists. Literally the whole Southern strategy thing, that's in recent history, and they've been the archetypes of all of the failings in this country, and Democrats keep bowing down to them, and they keep instead of listening to leftists and workers in this country, Bill Clinton and Third Way, pushing our party to the right and inviting corporatists and special interests in. Like, we've sold out our party, and like, you know, we make fun of the Republicans all the time, but hey, if they have a leader that's popular with the base, they bow down. Like, they listen to what's going on in the party, and I can disagree with that, and I can think it's spineless, because I think that with Trump, a lot of people were detested and disgusted by him, but they submitted to him because they wanted their sports team to win, essentially, in the arena of political discourse, and they just want to have more representation, and they don't stand for their values. I think that that's a big part of it, and I don't respect that. I think that that's lame, and I think that that is spineless. However, they listen to their base, and they're winning, and they are able to influence the Supreme Court. They're able to influence the Senate and the legislative branch, and they're in the executive branch right now with, access to the nuclear codes, access to the CDC in the time of a pandemic, and access to economic policy in a time where there is massive economic instability and we're on the verge of a giant recession. So with a lot of other bubbles about to break, like the student debt bubble, the tech bubble, and automation, all of these things on the horizon. So I just urge people to think and take a really honest look, and maybe think about what insurgents and outsiders are saying, because it might be time to change, and there's a lot of growing sentiment for that. So that's Accelerationism. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and sorry to scare everyone, but it's worth talking about, and it's very interesting to someone like me who is very into political theory, very into public policy, and very interested in what's happening sociologically and culturally in this country and the sentiment behind it.